Hi everyone, I'm Carlos. My two friends here are named Meinard and Deejay. Over the years, I've heard of many different renditions on the origins of mankind. Some are mythical and religious in nature, but some others are more scientific and more researched. To me, the fictional stories have always been far less boring, but at the same time, I also found the scientific theories much more fascinating. An example of one of these theories is the theory of evolution. Even as a Christian, I always admired the amount of thought and work that was put into it. Growing up, Darwin always had a fascination for animals and other such critters. The young man aspired to become a naturalist of sorts, so he attended many university classes about the study of wildlife. Soon he became well known among his peers and professors, and was one day invited as a gentleman naturalist on a survey ship called the HMS Beagle. This was when he first really started to form ideas for the theory. For on one of the islands they surveyed, he noticed that the birds resembled the ones he observed in Chile, but whose beak shapes varied. To him, this was evidence that the birds' beaks evolved for consuming different types of food depending on where they lived. On November of 1859, Charles had published this book on the origin of species. According to it, evolution is the process in which organisms change over time as a result of modifications in heritable physical and behavioral traits. These traits are then passed down. Simply put, it can be described as descent with modification.
Darwin had an idea which he liked to call natural selection. It's the process through which populations of living organisms adapt and change. In a population, people are naturally varied, meaning that some individuals have traits better suited to the environment than others, which made them more likely to reproduce. These traits are then passed down to their descendants, and so on. Natural selection will eventually lead to speciation, where a species gives rise to a different species. It's a process that helps explain the diversity of creatures all over the globe. There's another process in evolution called adaptation. This is the biological mechanism by which organisms adjust to new environments or to changes in their current environments. You see, there was a man named Alfred Russel Wallace, a British naturalist and biologist who saw a connection between the evolution of other organisms and their adaptation to changing environments and conditions. In developing this theory, both Wallace and Darwin explained how organisms adapt and evolve. Their idea is that the traits that are improved on and passed down allow future organisms to adapt to their environment better than the other organisms of the same species.
Organisms can adapt to an environment in different ways. These can either be biologically or behaviorally. By biological adaptation, we mean that they can alter bodily functions. A good example of this can be seen in the bodies of Tibetans. They thrive at altitudes where oxygen levels are lower than what most people are accustomed to. Breathing air that is that thin is guaranteed to make most people sick. Most people can survive at high altitudes for a short period of time because their bodies raise their levels of hemoglobin, a protein that transports oxygen in the blood. However, continuous high levels of this protein are dangerous, so this solution to high altitude survival won't be very good in the long run. However, Tibetans seem to have evolved to allow their bodies to use oxygen more efficiently without the need for extra hemoglobin. On the other hand, an example of behavioral adaptation is how emperor penguins in Antarctica crowd together to share their warmth in the middle of winter.
Okay, that's great and all, but if any of this is true, then is it possible for an organism to stop evolving? Back in 2013, a man named David Attenborough, a British naturalist, said that we humans have stopped evolving. His reasoning is that because we have started successfully being able to take care of most of our babies that are born, we are the only species to have put a halt to natural selection. This is because back in the earlier days of humanity, infants which were sickly or disfigured were mostly abandoned. And even if they weren't, they would still die under the parents' care. But now, we have the technology capable of helping these infants grow despite their sickliness or whatever disadvantage they were born with. There are people who supported David's claim, and there were some who disagreed, stating that we are still evolving, just at a much slower pace because life in the modern age is just way easier than it was before. But if what Mr. Attenborough said was true about us halting natural selection, then that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that in this day and age, everyone, even the quote-unquote weak, has a place in the world and deserves the same rights as anyone else. Thanks for watching.